just like this thing. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Truth About Traffic in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. This is a fabulous community on the water. I say that, I know that all of you in the room know where you are, but we do have a YouTube channel that's live, and we are expecting different interests from around the world. People, and they may not know that we're in this beautiful historic city talking about traffic. And yes, we have traffic. Not maybe as much as some cities, but we do have traffic. So I'd like to start beginning with the land acknowledgement, please. And now we need to advance the slide, so you put me in charge of that? Excellent. That was something that wasn't, excellent, there we go. It's never a good thing to put one in charge of such things. So as we begin, we respectfully acknowledge the land we are meeting on, and the city of Kingston is situated on the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. And we give thanks to these nations for their care and stewardship over this shared land. We acknowledge that some city processes are shaped by colonialism. We commit as part of this workshop and in any outcomes that flow from it to keep this front of mind and center equity, inclusivity, access, and anti-oppression throughout our work. Thank you for that. Now, I wanted to just give you a few sort of context-setting components this morning, this afternoon, evening. You never know where you are in the world, so it's quite possible I'm addressing an audience. I'm very excited to be on YouTube. Are you excited to be on YouTube, everyone? A little clapping for YouTube. Woo! Yay, welcome. So you might wonder, who is this person at the front of the room in a bright pink shirt that's matching her bright pink face? So I am Sue Cumming of Cumming & Company. I'm a public engagement consultant and facilitator. I work across the province. I live in Kingston. I'm a recovering Torontonian living in Kingston for the last 18 years. I've had the pleasure of working with the city most recently on the Active Transportation Master Plan. I did do the public engagement. I know some of you will be glaring at me for the Woburn Crossing, for the business plan, which unfolded a few years ago. And I am part of the integrated mobility team, so part of the team working with HDR and Taki Consulting. So I'm really happy to be here this evening and to be able to share the opportunity of learning, and as you will, and be able to share some perspectives. I do teach at Queen's University as well, so I'm a pleasure to be an adjunct there in the School of Urban and Regional Planning and teaching public engagement. So hopefully enough about me, but I do want to tell you that I don't want to be in traffic, but I also don't want to be traffic. And I think for many of us, that's sort of a unique piece, because we are traffic and we have to get places. We have to go to school, we have to go to work, we want to visit our friends, we might have health care, we want to go to our remarkable downtown. If you're visiting us from YouTube, please come to our remarkable downtown. And so we do need to get places, and how we get around does impact our community. And tonight, I think, is a unique opportunity to hear from Brent Toderian, who I'll introduce more formally in about 2 minutes, about experiences around the world, things that maybe we wouldn't even have thought could possibly work here. So our format tonight is fairly straightforward, we hope. We will hear from Brent Toderian shortly, who has some remarks none of us have seen, which is always a great thing, perhaps, because he can say whatever he wishes to really enlighten and inspire us. Then we'll have some time for some questions of Brent, and then we're going to pull up a panel. So by pulling up, I mean this little table is going to slide forward. We're going to run quickly. That staff team at the back's waving. They're going to help bring chairs over. And then we'll be able to have some reflections. So those reflections are really important to hear what some of the key change agents in our city have with respect to some of the commentary that you're hearing this evening. I have to put on my progressive glasses, and they're not old person glasses, so I just wanted to highlight that. So when we get to the panelists, Paige Agnew, just give a wave. I will introduce you more formally later, is the Commissioner of Growth and Development Services for the city, and she will be responding and reflecting on what she's hearing and how that might fit into our community building initiatives. Then we have Ian Semple, who's the Director of Transportation and Transit. Equally, he will be giving some perspectives on what he's hearing and how that might fit well with the construct. We also have Megan Quinn. Megan is a citizen member of the Municipal Advisory Committee, and she'll be providing from her perspective what she's hearing and how that might be factored into the work that we'd be doing on these various plans. Then we have Amy Krasnozen, who is with Public Health Nurse with the Southeast Health Unit, and she will also be providing some perspectives from that very important public health review. So again, they're going to be hearing it live as you are, so they're not going to have a lot of time to react to this, so I know that you'll be mindful of that. The second half of our evening, when we have the panel, is really for your discussion. So we want to have a lively discussion. We want you to be able to pose questions, share thoughts, and ideas that really resonate with you, and let's take some steps out of what we might normally do to see what we could maybe change here. We know that there are others who've bought tickets. We might let them in once we get going, so when they come in, they'll come in hopefully very comfortably. So I think at this point, Brent, I will ask, I'm going to give you this very long, I've got 9 pages of a bio. I might not give it all, I might just give a few comments. Short version, but I will ask you not to ask any questions of Brent while he's speaking. We want to be able to hear him in his entirety, and then following that, we'll have pretty much the rest of our evening for questions and discussion, and I will help guide that. We've got some tools for you to do that. So looking for your agreement that we will sort of let the presentation unfold and then be able to really go to our discussion. The washrooms are down the hall, not for those on YouTube, but down here. We have refreshments equally, not for YouTube, but for you, please have some coffee. So if you need to get up at any point, we will not be offended. Go that way maybe, so Brent doesn't kind of skip over you. But certainly if you need to do anything, we respect that you may need to do that. So Brent Toderian, who's Brent? Brent is a nationally and internationally respected practitioner and thought leader in sustainable urbanism, city planning, transportation, urban design, and change management. He consults for cities, organizations, and progressive developers across Canada and across the globe, with both current and recent international engagements that include the cities of Sydney, Auckland, Sacramento, Medellin, maybe saying that incorrectly, Oslo, Helsinki, Reykjavik, and my favorite, Paris. He is going to be talking to you tonight about the Turning Point conversation, and I'm going to lead it to him. We see the slide here, so you get a sense of when that's all going to fit in. And Brent, I would invite you up, and we are very excited to hear your remarks this evening.
Thank you, Sue.
Right, excellent.
Thank you very much, Sue. Wow, this is loud. I could probably talk without the microphone easily in this room because I'm a loud person. But for YouTube purposes, we'll keep the mic on. Hello to all of you. Thank you for coming tonight. Hello to everyone watching live stream. I hope it's interesting for you. I know there's at least one viewing party to the folks in Reconnect Rochester in Rochester, New York. They're actually holding their own session like this with us on a screen in the front, and they're going to have their own community conversation afterwards. So good on you for that, as my Aussie clients would say. I think that's fantastic. So hello. This isn't this kind of standard situation where someone from outside comes in, gives a talk that maybe doesn't have particularly much to do with the city that they happen to be in, and then the locals try to make heads or tails of whether or not that relates to anything they're doing. And as a former chief planner for Vancouver and a top planner in Calgary, I've been in that position where I've been the local commenting on the outsider. That's not really what this is, because I've been advising the city of Kingston for 7 years now. I've met many of you. You've heard me speak before in this community. And so I sort of feel like I'm an extension of city staff here. So this is not a presentation about what all the other cities in the world are doing. This is actually specifically a presentation about Kingston. And it's in the context of 2 exercises that I'm helping the city with, which is the overlapped and integrated work programs for the new official plan and the new integrated mobility plan, or the IMP. So that's aligned land use planning and transportation planning as one aligned exercise. And for those of you not wonks like me, that may not sound like a big deal, but it's a really big freaking deal, because most of the time, those exercises are done separately, and frankly, in most cities, certainly in North America, barely even talk to each other. So the fact that they are fully integrated is innovation. It is light years ahead of what this city and many North American cities do. So that's something that's very exciting, and I'm very happy and proud to be working with the city leaders on that. In the context, or in the category of over-promising and under-delivering, when I wrote the bio for myself on the link to sign up for tonight, I said that the conversation will be a turning point for the city in the context of transportation and how we think about traffic. I don't know. I might have oversold that a bit. But what I would say is, and let's see if I get this right. Nope, that's the wrong direction. That's the wrong direction. Let's see. Here's the truth. The badly needed new IMP and new OP, that's the turning point. And we are calling it that as an exercise. We should be able to talk as a community, you should be able to talk as a community about before these plans and after these plans in terms of the leadership, the innovation, the progress, etc. Anything less than that is sort of unsatisfactory. It's a bit of a failure. And that's the high standard that's been set for this exercise. So that's the real turning point. This tonight is supposed to be a situation where it leads you to be able to think differently about traffic, because what I found in cities is if you try to do something out of the box, even counterintuitive around traffic, but everybody's still in this kind of traditional mindset about how they think about traffic, it can be really hard, really hard. And I'm being polite. I often refer to it as a bloodbath, because people don't want to have a conversation about something that they think is going to make their drive to work or their commute to work harder. And they can be quite adamant about that. So I think every city in North America needs to think very differently about cars and traffic in general if you really seriously want your city to be better. That's a sort of a first unofficial truth for tonight. That's based on the idea, and the integration of the two plans is based on the idea that if you do land use and transportation separately, you fail at both. You do a bad job at both. And almost every North American city is doing, to a certain extent, a bad job at both and needs to do much better. So in Vancouver, where I was chief planner for a while, the very old saying is the best transportation plan is a great land use plan. In other words, if you actually get your land use right, think about the things in your neighborhood that you could walk to, bike to, take public transit to, or yes, drive to, especially in short trips. If they are closer together nearby, there's more choices in your neighborhood, it makes building safe transportation infrastructure so much easier. But if everything's far, you don't have the budget to make everything safe in terms of getting to all those things. So it really does start with land use, but the two have to be completely separated. I start every presentation I do, I created this slide a few years ago, and I start every presentation I do with it because it's a reminder of what we're actually trying to achieve. Over and above your local challenges and issues, which may or may not be unique to you, these are the things that every city in North America and the world really are facing. The climate crisis, the housing crisis, the inequality crisis, the public health crisis, the infrastructure cost crisis. And it occurs to me, having used this slide for a few years now, that I really should be adding a sixth, the Trump economic crisis. I promise it's the only time I'll have a politician's name on a slide tonight. But it cannot be ignored, the fact that I usually talk about the challenge of addressing these 5 crises through smart city building, but this last crisis has kind of been sucking all the oxygen out of the room in most conversations, because politicians, leaders and such are sort of feeling like this is not just the first thing to talk about, but in some cases almost the only thing to talk about. And that can be a real challenge when, frankly, all these other 5 have a really big impact on how well we address number 6. But I flag it because as we're all very focused and interested in what's happening right now, with a manufactured crisis that's not based on normal systemic economic change, but something that's been created, we have to make sure that we haven't lost our ability to put attention to the other 5 crises that we were already facing and that were big enough challenges in and of themselves. In the integrated 2 plans, if you've been part of the public engagement process, you might have seen this already. Staff have been putting out what we've been calling the big ideas, the transformative new approaches that would, frankly, if you do them, they would represent a turning point in the way the city works as you grow. This is a plan, by the way, that is intended to provide the answer of how well the city will work by the time it reaches 220,000 people. So these are the big ideas that will make sure that the city is better as it grows, not worse, frankly. And traffic and transportation and cars is one of the most common things that is discussed when it comes to whether a city will get worse as it grows. Not because people necessarily perceive new neighbors making their city worse, but it's all those cars that the new neighbors will want to drive that may make the city worse. And that can be the biggest tension when it comes to growth. So, you don't need to, we're not going to talk about this tonight, but you should look at these and take a look at these and provide staff with your thoughts and comments, because that is where we are in the process in terms of conversations about those big ideas. But what I wanted to do tonight is say that if we're going to have a serious conversation about traffic, we have to start telling the truth in a much more blunt, and I call it constructively candid, but that's just a nice way of saying blunt, and sometimes almost blunt to a fault way, because if we're not willing to tell the truth about these tensions, it's very hard to make progress. It's very hard to actually get to a point where we can agree or disagree on things, but have clarity on maybe why we're agreeing or disagreeing. So I'm going to tell you a series of truths tonight. I'm not asking you if you agree or not. They are truths from the perspective of my 33 years of evidence-based city planning. And I tell you this, it is evidence-based. I want to say this. Nothing I talk about is ideological. I do not engage in ideological, this is the way the world should be from an ideological perspective. But frankly, I don't have a lot of time with ideology getting in the way of success or failure, progress or stagnation. This isn't political. Notwithstanding, I use the T word. I'm not going to be getting into politics tonight. Because in my experience, I worked for the city of Vancouver and the city of Calgary, a very left-wing city and a very right-wing city. And in my experience working there and in every other kind of city around the world, and certainly across Canada, there isn't right or left, there's dumb or smart. There's successful or unsuccessful. There's evidence-based or vibes-based. That's my observation. So I focus on not politics, but pragmatism. I consider myself bold, I consider myself visionary, but first and foremost, I consider myself pragmatic. We actually have to achieve realistic and positive outcomes. So this is pragmatic, this is evidence-based, this is common sense. A term that sometimes gets used against these ideas. But everything, I think and hope, as you listen tonight, will kind of sound like common sense if you really think about it. The next truth, Kingston isn't one size fits all. It has very different parts. One thing I don't like about the approach that some urbanists take is they throw out sometimes ideologically driven answers for better cities, but don't acknowledge that Kingston isn't just one kind of place, or their city isn't just one kind of place. You have a downtown, you have an inner city, or a central area, as you call it. You have suburbs, and you have rural areas. And to suggest that the solutions may be the same for those different areas is somewhat moronic. And yet sometimes the lazy answers get thrown out. That's not what we're doing through these exercises. What does traffic and a better approach to traffic and land use mean in the different contexts of the city in real life, not hypothetically? So that's an important truth. That's obvious to you, but I have to tell you, too many planning programs do not factor that in. Do not address that. Do not tell that truth. Oops, wrong way. Second truth, or third truth, if you grow in cars as you grow in people with the same mode share, you get gridlock. Mode share is basically just the percent of trips in the city by each way of getting around. Blank percent by car, blank percent walking, blank percent public transit, that's mode share. It's your share of all the trips by certain mode. Right now, you have a very high car mode share. You've got growing mode shares in the other areas. But if you grew to 220,000 people with the same mode share for cars as you currently have, you will have gridlock. And the bad news is there isn't enough room to widen the roads enough to accommodate the additional cars that will come. So you, like every other city in North America as you grow, because every city in North America almost is growing, you have to change the mode share. You have to have those new people want to use cars less because there are other choices, attractive choices, because otherwise it doesn't fit. Oops, I keep doing. Here's a hard truth. The war on the car is a lie. How many of you, raise your hands if you've heard the term the war on the car? That's not as many as I thought. The war on the car is a political mechanism to make you mad and vote for them, or to click on their website, perhaps. I won't get into who created it. You probably could guess if you thought about it for a bit. But it's intended to suggest that any reallocation of space or budget in our city is a war on the car, a war on drivers. And that is designed to make you mad. It's to manufacture anger. The truth is, anyone who understands cities knows that if everybody drives, nobody moves. It's a simple geometry exercise. Cars are bigger than people. They take more space. But if you're used to driving everywhere, and if you're dependent on your car to fully participate in what a city has to offer, then anything that feels like it threatens that feels threatening. And then you, ironically, become the loudest objectors to anything that changes that primacy of the car. And why not? It's human nature. You're protecting your way of life. That's been created by car dependency, and it's fueled by narratives like the war on the car. It's a manipulation. It's a deliberate manipulation. Next time you hear it, think about it that way. Why are you being manipulated, and is it working? No one is trying to force anyone out of their car. Good cities offer more choices. Choices. How can more choices be bad? Nobody's saying that you won't be able to drive. Put another way, no one is telling you that you have to use a bike to get your kids to hockey practice across town in a snowstorm with your hockey bag on your shoulder. You may think that's ridiculous. I get versions of that comment almost every place I work, almost every day. It's usually in the question and answer period where they say, but your ideas are interesting, but in my case, I need to get my kids to hockey, and I'm not going to carry, I literally heard it last week. I can't carry my hockey bag on my bike. And by the way, if you've hacked the code of my PowerPoint style, I put the good words in green, and hockey is always a good word. Here's the problem. Urbanists sometimes, or bike advocates or walking advocates, instead of acknowledging the lived experience or the opinions of people, will sometimes debate. And they'll say, well, hold on, you could have a cargo bike and dress warmer because it's all about weather. It's all about clothing choices and weather, and there's truth to that. And fat tires and treads will allow you to do it in a snowstorm. And here's a picture of me doing exactly that. And that's the wrong answer. I have no disrespect for the folks who do that. I love that people do that. But having a debate about whether you should do that or not, or whether you could do that or not, we don't know people's abilities and personal conditions or personal circumstances. And we don't know how badly designed the neighborhood they live in relative to creating car dependency. So it's the wrong thing to do, in my opinion. Although I love the people who will do this and show me pictures of it, the better answer, in my opinion, is to say, if you want to, need to, or want to, ride your bike or drive your car to your kids at hockey practice, then the best thing for you is that this lady rides her bike because she thought that choice was great, and that lady walks, and the other gentleman behind takes the bus. Because they're not competing with you. They're not in front of you in their car competing for finite space on a tight road. So you get to have your choice, and other people making other choices because we've made them attractive actually works better for you if you're driving your kids to hockey. So the whole argument is the wrong argument. Nobody's trying to force anybody not to use their car. But if we make other choices more attractive for other people, then there's fewer people trying to drive. And they're not stealing geometry from the Commonwealth, and they're leaving more space for you. And how can that be bad? So I think we tend to have often the wrong arguments, the wrong discussions. The truth is, many Kingston households can't go car-free or even car-light. But even if they wanted to. But wouldn't it be interesting if we could just need fewer cars? I often say, people say, I can't go car-free. And I say, well, how many cars do you have? And they say 3. And I say, well, wouldn't it be nice for your household income if you had the option, the choice, to have 2 cars instead of 3, because something in your conditions changed, and you could save the cost of a 3rd car, or go from 2 cars to 1, or yes, maybe 1 car to car-free. But nobody's talking about going from 3 cars to 0, and you live in the suburbs in a car-dependent context. But wouldn't it be good to have scenarios change where you wouldn't need to have the 3rd car or the 2nd car? That's what we're talking about, depending on the context where you might live. These are choices and options where you're not forced to do something, like buy the 3rd car. A lot of people talk about electric bikes in the context of that choice of the 2nd or 3rd car. Some may take it as an opportunity to go car-free, but many others say it allows me to sell the 2nd car or the 3rd car and use the electric bike for short trips. And I'm going to talk about short trips in a minute. These are options for your household that you can choose. One of my public meeting exercises in a project I was working on, I often take samples of the comments and share them with City Council. And this one I've had for years because it was just so simple. They said, I like cars, but I don't want to design my life, all of our lives, around cars. I want choice. That's what we're talking about. Nobody's being forced to do anything. So you can see why the war on the car is a manipulation. Truth. It is true that the big problem is car dependency. I often say I don't dislike cars. I'm a male born in Canada, and I played with Hot Wheels like most other kids in Canada when I grew up. I know exactly what car I would buy if I wanted to buy a car, and I kind of always wish I could or would buy it. But I don't want a car. What I hate is car dependency. What I won't accept as a city planner is that we've designed deliberately car dependency when we've had choices or alternatives to that. That's the truth. And it starts with land use. Often it's bad infrastructure, but it usually starts with land use. Low density, separated, where everything is far, and so you have to go far distances to get anything, and even the short trips are not safe or attractive, so you use the car for everything. You're car dependent. Dependency is not freedom. I often get people debate with me on this, and I say, how can dependency ever be freedom? Cars can represent freedom, but only if they're a choice, not if they are required for everything. And we've designed places where they are required. Truth, more choices are better for everyone. Yes, everyone. Whether you choose to take advantage of a choice doesn't mean it isn't benefiting you. Because when other people choose it, it makes your choice easier, or cheaper, or in some way better. Because here's the point. I've been saying this for years. If you design a city primarily for cars, it fails for everyone, including drivers. If you design a multimodal city, it works better for everyone, including drivers. So how can this be a war on drivers? That's a manufactured narrative. Truth, multimodal cities move more people in less space. That in itself would be enough reason to do it. Mobility in cities, and especially as cities grow, is a space problem. It's how much you can fit because of the geometry. And as we grow, as I said a few slides ago, we need to be able to move more people with less space. So that would be enough reason to actually do things differently, move people with less space. But here's the truth. Long slide, huh? I don't have very many like this. This is my biggest. More choices mean moving more people with less space, less public money, less pollution and noise, lower emissions, better public health, and lower public health care costs, better household affordability, better equity, better accessibility, less impact on heritage and environmental features, better economic competitiveness. I joked that I was tempted to start a second slide and start ... and do another whole slide. I could have kept going, but you get the point. Any one of these would be enough public interest reason to do it differently, and we've got dozens of reasons. Dozens. This is a no-brainer to do things differently. And so that's why narratives like the war in the car are created, because they need to distract you from doing the obvious in your own self-interest, to your own benefit. Truth, better cars can't be the solution and will likely in key ways make things worse. There are such things as better cars, but here's the problem with better cars. Electric vehicles are better than internal combustion vehicles. They are better. Let's be very clear on that. But have you heard of Jevons paradox? It's not a band name, although I said if I ever started a band, that would be my band name. So Jevons paradox says, anytime you improve something, people use it more. We have been driving more, and emissions have actually gone up since we lowered fuel emissions and increased electric vehicles. Because it's a green car, that means I can buy another one. So many people have actually bought an additional car that's an EV. They didn't get rid of one of the other cars, they bought an additional car that is an EV. And they bought them bigger. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the whole point of Jevons paradox, which was created a long time ago to apply to almost any technological innovation, is you have to be careful to constrain expansion of use, or else you end up erasing the benefit. And guess what? That's what all the analysis shows. Emissions are up. Pollution is up as cars have gotten greener because we've driven more, because we've given ourselves permission to do so because the cars are greener. That doesn't mean you don't design a better car, but you look at it in the context of what we can't have is more driving if we have better cars. I'll get to that in a minute. So electric vehicles can't be the only answer. You need fewer cars and less driving at the same time as you have better cars. We know from analysis that even just from the one issue of climate emissions, not factoring in the fact that electric vehicles take up just as much space as internal combustion vehicles, but even from just the emissions perspective, electric vehicles don't drop the emissions enough to address the transportation issues for greenhouse gas emissions to get us where we need to be. It got us where we needed to be relative to 1.5 degrees, which we've already passed. So it's going to take more than that, and yet the conversation has become electric vehicles are the answer, and as long as we can roll that out, and by the way, there are massive challenges with that, but as long as we can roll that out, that's our answer. It can at most be part of the answer. You can be pro-electric vehicle and still say it's not nearly enough. And the mistake is to treat it as the solution. Similarly, don't get me started on driverless vehicles. That will actually increase traffic. It will increase congestion. The only way it won't is if it's fleet. If we still own personal vehicles, there will be more congestion, more driving. That is 100% guaranteed. The truth about technology in general is that if you don't use it to support the fundamental right things, but instead use it to give yourself an excuse to not do the fundamental right things, then technology can make things worse. And what I mean by that is, I can't tell you how many times I've had mayors tell me, we don't need to do public transit because everyone will own an electric car. We don't need to do fill in the blank because technology will save us with fill in the blank. It becomes an excuse, a distraction, to avoid doing the fundamentals. I was asked to comment on Masdar, which is the so-called greenest community on Earth in a desert, which means it's not green. In Wired magazine, and my quote, amongst all the boosters who are talking about what's called gizmo green, sort of technological solutions to everything, I said, new technology can be advantageous, but it doesn't replace compact, walkable, complete communities and a good relationship basically between where you work and where you live, and where you go shop and where you go to school and all those things, which is land use and transportation, which is controlled by your municipal council. So by all means, use technology to facilitate that, but don't use technology instead of that, or as an excuse to say, I don't have to do that because technology will save us instead. Truth, bigger vehicles are a big problem. Emissions have gone up. Pollution has gone up. EVs have better brakes, but there's actually more tire deterioration with EVs and bigger vehicles in general. And tires are a huge pollution issue in cities. And energy that you need has gone up and up because the vehicles have gotten bigger and bigger. There's a term for it, car bloat. And it's also, by the way, really, really more dangerous in terms of deaths to anyone outside the car, and even deaths for people inside the car or vehicle, because there's an arms race. The vehicles keep getting bigger and bigger, and you can almost never keep up in the arms race. Especially deaths of kids, especially and particularly. And that's only a few of the issues with the size. It's also exacerbating the geometry problem. By the way, if you're a municipal leader out there, do not increase your parking standards to fit the larger vehicles. All you would be doing is encouraging and inducing bigger vehicles. The only thing that's keeping it in check is that it's hard to park in the parking spaces. So do not increase your parking sizes. Truth. Car dependency causes traffic. Bike lanes don't cause traffic. There is zero evidence that it does and ample evidence that it doesn't, no matter what any politician tells you. Too many cars causes traffic. More cars than you have space causes traffic. And by the way, bus lanes also don't cause traffic. Too many cars causes traffic. And by the way, in case I have to say it, sidewalks don't cause traffic either. That sounds ridiculous, but somewhere out there right now, somebody's making the argument that if there wasn't sidewalks, then pedestrians wouldn't go to the intersections and we wouldn't need to time the signal changes to respect pedestrians, which would allow us to move cars faster, so sidewalks are causing traffic. Maybe I just gave it away to someone. But it is ridiculous how many things will be blamed for traffic except for the fact that there are too many cars. If you think about that, that's actually ridiculous. Occam's razor, the most obvious reason for something happening is the only thing that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge as the cause for something. That's what causes traffic. And Sue, your comment about being traffic was, I noted it, it's on point. You know, I didn't include the cartoon that I sometimes do that says everybody's saying if it weren't for all this traffic, I'd be home already. And of course, you're in traffic, so you are traffic. That is an important realization. But mobility in cities is largely about space. This is one of my favorite drawings that illustrates how we allocate space in cities. And yet any suggestion that any of this change, like think about this really for a minute, any suggestion that any of this be given more space and any interruption or inconvenience on this, what's it called? A war on the car. Think about that. Think about the privilege. Think about the unfairness. And any interest in even slightly recalibrating, if it inconveniences the car, is automatically polarized and positioned and used as wedge issues in elections. The same artist did this during the pandemic to illustrate that with all of us physically separating, it got even worse. My clients in Sydney, Australia, in the transit organization, did this. I collect versions of these. There are dozens and dozens of them going back to the 1920s, which shows how long we've known this. What does it take to move 1,000 people, 1 train, 15 buses, or up to 1,000 cars with 1.37 hectares of parking in central Sydney in this case? It's about space. If everybody tries to do this, central Sydney doesn't work. Central Sydney doesn't exist as it is. One of my favorites is from Santiago, Chile, where I worked, because it showed not only the space issue, but it added in the bus stuck in traffic. So it has the bonus points of illustrating the unfairness of the bus being stuck in traffic. And yet, I still hear certain people saying, buses cause traffic. Buses cause congestion. If that bus were out of there, the cars would move easier. If that bus were out there and everyone in that bus was driving, how many cars would be added to the road? Truth, moving more people with less space as we grow will take reprioritizing. reprioritizing space, reprioritizing budget. This is a relatively new version of an old graphic. The city of Vancouver was actually the first city that put into policy the hierarchy, the reverse hierarchy. Walking first, then biking, then public transit, then goods movement, and then the car. And since then, many, many cities, many I worked with, this is Medellin, Colombia, Sue, that's how to pronounce it. Sorry, that was rude. I was pronouncing it wrong for a long time. The locals corrected me. I worked with them on their transportation plan and their land use plan, which were integrated. So this is the Spanish version. But here's the point, and this is important. Not the same everywhere. What again bothers me about some urbanists is they will present that priority to a city like you in Kingston or North American cities out there with suburbs and sort of make it sound like we're going to try to institute that policy in your suburban area or in your rural area, and it doesn't work. Imagine, well, I don't need to imagine, if some of you live in the suburbs, you're hearing walking, biking, and transit are prioritized first, and you're thinking about losing something that you have counted on and think you deserve. That sounds pretty scary. Maybe it's warranted, but it still isn't accurate, because the truth of it is, in the suburbs, this prioritization is not rational. It's not pragmatic. But the question is, what is a pragmatic goal in the suburbs? Is balance pragmatic? Because that prioritization is not balance. It's prioritization. That's not the same thing. I don't like the word balance in the urban parts of a city or the urbanizing parts of the city, because that's not a good enough standard. But balance is an ambitious goal in the suburbs, and it would be a really ambitious goal in the rural areas, wouldn't it? So you set the ambitious but rational goals in the different parts of your city. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And that's the conversation we're having in the context of the IMP. What is an ambitious goal in the different parts of the city? And I think that's important to tell you as locals, because on the one hand, we are progressive and ambitious, and we know the challenges we face and the changes we have to make, but we're not morons about it. We understand that different parts of the city start in different places. And you have to acknowledge that and proceed and progress from there. Oops, let's see. Truth, widening roads almost always induces more driving. This is a big one, and doesn't fix congestion. If you're thinking out there, the answer to congestion is to widen roads. I hope you've seen one of my presentations before. You probably know what I'm going to say. Induced traffic means you're basically just inducing more driving. And what every study that has ever been done has shown, that within a couple of years of spending billions of dollars in some cases in the context of large highways and interchanges, of widening, it fills up because you've induced more driving. So you have a very, very expensive and highly consequential quick fix that doesn't last long, and you end up with more cars in the same congestion, emitting more pollution and emissions, etc. So that's why there's the saying, you will never build your way out of traffic congestion with car lanes. You will, on the other hand, make a lot of money for road construction interests and car sales people. But it won't, if your goal is to fix congestion, it won't work. It'll make congestion worse because you have more cars stuck in it. We've known that for a long time. Building more roads. This is one of the earliest articles I found, and I still use it on induced traffic. What's up with that? Building bigger roads actually makes traffic worse. When I started my career, this was not well known. Now a lot of people actually know it. And it's normal citizens that are challenging some professionals and politicians out there when road widenings are proposed. We've known it since at least 1955. Lewis Mumford said, adding car lanes to deal with traffic congestion is like loosening your belt to cure obesity. We understand the principle. You will spend a lot of money, and maybe getting a ribbon cutting if you're a politician, so maybe that's what makes it worth it. But you will spend a lot of money failing over and over. And by the way, as a corollary or an extension, truth, more tunnels are not the answer. More car tunnels are not the answer. I thought this was the dumbest tunnel proposal I've ever heard. which was Elon's tunnel proposal, where he was going to use the Boring Company to build a network of tunnels underneath cities. I'm the former City of Vancouver chief planner who called the idea dumb and dangerous. I called it that not because I thought the tunnels would collapse, not that kind of dangerous, but because it's a distraction. And Elon knows it. He actually admitted in his biography that that's why he did it. It's a distraction that undermines investment in public transit, because you don't have to do public transit because this is your answer. More cars. That's why the nickname for this is Tunnels for Tesla. So I called it dumb and dangerous. Elon didn't own Twitter yet, so he could only block me. He didn't ban me. But the point is that there's a need to, there's an urge to be positive about technology, because if you're not, you're against the future. You're against progress. But there are, like everything else in life, stupid ideas and smart ideas. And from the context of the impact on cities, you've got to be honest about it. Truth, short trips are a big opportunity in cities. When you're thinking about the kind of trips that seem particularly inconvenient or inconceivable when if you had to do them by walking, biking, or public transit instead of your car, often, not always, but often you're thinking about long trips, or at least complicated trips, but usually long trips. And there's a reason why those of us in this business are particularly talking about the low-hanging fruit, the particular opportunity with short trips. And one of the big reasons is because there's so many of them. This is a statistic from the United States. Canadian statistics very similar. About half of all daily trips in the United States are less than 3 miles, that's 4.8 kilometers, which is considered in this context a short trip. These are the trip sizes that are considered very feasible to be converted into a walking or a biking trip. If there's something you can actually walk to in your neighborhood, because this is how it connects to land use. If you don't have anything within that short distance, that's because you live maybe in sprawl where everything is far away and separated. But if you have things to walk to, getting to that is a short trip, and if it's an enjoyable short trip, you may choose to not take your car. Half the trips in the United States and Canada, and this is Kingston, half the trips, it's remarkably consistent. Half the trips are short, relatively short. So if this is the low-hanging fruit, the opportunity, you need land use to give you something to walk to. You need infrastructure to make the walk safe and delightful. And then it becomes an option. And just like that, you're taking a surprisingly large percentage of the car trips out of your system by doing something not only relatively doable, but in the work I'm doing in planning around the country, when we do surveys to ask what's the most popular big ideas that a city could do to make the city better, the number one idea in a number of exercises I'm doing is being able to walk to something in your neighborhood for a jug of milk or the proverbial coffee or something like that, or walking your kids to school, particularly important. Just being able to have things to walk to. So not only is it the low-hanging fruit for solving or certainly significantly improving the traffic and transportation situation, it's also popular for livability and enjoyment in your neighborhood. So where's the downside in that? By the way, while I was looking, literally last night, for an article to use in my slideshow to illustrate that point, I found this. I didn't know it existed. This is from a tire company who tells us the extra piece of information that short trips are also really bad for your car. So it's another reason to rethink using your car to drive. Happens to be bad for your engine block, your oil, and your battery life. Ironically, they use 10-mile-long trips as their definition for short trips, even longer than us professionals use. And the recommendations, not surprisingly, it's a tire company, not surprisingly, are not, take public transit, ride your bike, or walk. One of their recommendations is actually take more longer trips to sort of mix them in. But it struck me, since I'm constantly trying to reinforce the message that this is not against drivers, the whole idea that you might have a better quality of life, improve congestion, improve your public health in terms of being able to walk to things, all of those reasons to transform some short trips by car into short trips in another way, it's even better for your car, for God's sakes. So how can we possibly be arguing about this? It doesn't mean you have to do it. This is all about choice. But it's another reason to think about it as an option. And if nothing else, it has a very powerful effect, can have a very powerful effect on the traffic and transportation in your city. If you've never thought about this before, it may be quite the realization that half the trips, like think about that, half the trips in your city are these kinds of short trips. When I found that out, I was surprised, and I'm a professional at this. Truth, we badly need to make walking and biking to school make sense. And I say it that way because I have no interest in trying to shame parents for not facilitating or supporting their kids walking to school, biking to school. We would probably all agree that it's a good thing. It would be a good thing to do that. But usually the reasons you get for not doing it are about safety. Sometimes it's about time, all of our busy lives and such, but often it's about safety. But here's the irony, and you guys have probably, some of you have seen this cartoon before. There's too much traffic for Billy to walk, so we drive him. The idea that the traffic causes safety problems, so you don't want to let your kid walk because of the safety problems, so you drive him, therefore becoming part of the traffic, that creates the safety problem. You get the point? So this is the problem we have. Kingston, there's work on school streets, there's programs and such being worked on in terms of making it a better choice. Again, none of this is forcing people, but wouldn't it be good if we actually had the conditions where we've made walking and biking to school make sense? I don't want to try to force anybody to walk their kids to school when it doesn't make sense because we have unsafe conditions out there. How can you blame parents for that? But it's on us as city builders and on you as citizens to try to support the idea of creating the conditions where it would make sense. Truth, Vision Zero only matters if there's urgent follow-through. If you don't know what Vision Zero is, it's a philosophy and also a program and a kind of a commitment that says we're going to get down to 0 pedestrian and cycling deaths that are preventable. Because, why do you have to create a whole movement around Vision Zero? Because there are a lot of pedestrian and cycling deaths out there because of car collisions, often because of unsafe conditions for people on foot and on bikes, and particularly kids again. So there is a Vision Zero policy. How long has it existed in Kingston? Since 2019. There are pedestrian deaths. You may or may not be hearing what happened yesterday. And so, but the problem is, in my observation, is that a lot of cities have Vision Zero policies. You wouldn't necessarily know it in the context of the follow-through. So like any commitment, like any vision, it's only as good as its follow-through. So how do we make Vision Zero mean something? And we actually, if you read the big idea around Vision Zero, it kind of says Vision Zero when we really mean it. And that's a silly way to write policy, but it kind of is true. It kind of is honest. So one of the problems is you have cities out there. Picture an unsafe intersection. Picture an unsafe road crossing where you have to walk a kilometer or 2 kilometers in either direction to get to a crossing, but you just want to get across the street. And so why not run across and jump that median? If you've got fundamentally unsafe conditions, how do you convince City Hall to change the fundamentally unsafe conditions? This is not about, I'm not saying this to reference Kingston, but even Kingston acknowledges that there's been a challenging history around this. Often what is the case is that, frankly, you need a certain number of people to die before there is enough political attention or staff attention to have an improvement done. Or, ironically, it could also be about how many people are doing the crossing, and if enough people are doing the crossing, that means there's a demand for that and will improve the conditions. but you're measuring the need for something based on how many people are using it when it's fundamentally unsafe. The way I put it, when you're being asked to prove that safe infrastructure across unsafe conditions is needed, it's hard to justify a bridge by the number of people swimming across a raging river. And yet, cities out there maybe listening on YouTube, that may be the actual official approach, the actual official policy. You've got to prove that enough people want to cross the raging river before you'll build a bridge. Think about the ridiculousness of that. Truth, speed doesn't save that much time, but it does kill. I'm talking about speed limits now. This can be a really touchy subject. Your local streets, your streets around schools have lowered to 40 kilometers an hour, I believe. There's a lot of cities that have been given powers by states or provincial governments to reconsider speed limits. This is a big issue because it literally can mean life or death. I collect these kinds of things from different parts of the world, different languages, miles per hour versus kilometers per hour. The point is, the faster people are going, the more likely in a collision that you die, or that you're seriously injured. By the way, what these don't include is the likeliness of having the collision at all. Because if you're going fast, you're more likely to have the collision because you can't avoid it. And by the way, it gets even worse when the vehicles are bigger. Because now they're heavier, they slow down, it takes longer to slow down, they can't see as well, they literally have a different field of vision, so it's even deadlier. So if you're going fast and you're big, you're more likely to hit someone and more likely to kill them. That's the context for a conversation about whether or not you should reconsider some of your speed limits. But I don't need to tell you how the community conversation can often go. Well, that means it's going to add blank number of seconds to my commute each day, or inconvenience me in some way. I often think, what level of inconvenience is more important than kids dying? I'm deliberately being blunt about that. But that is how dialogues in cities play out. So it matters what your policies are about that. Truth, multimodal cities are safer for everyone, including drivers. There is often this narrative that says, well, I'm safe in my tank. It's the other people outside that are unsafe, as if that is a reasonable answer. But the studies actually show it's safer for everyone to create multimodal, protected, safe infrastructure. Separated bike lanes, for example, every study has shown, is safer not only for the people in the bike lanes, and by the way, a lot of people use bike lanes that aren't on bikes, mobility aids, scooters, sometimes walking, even though they shouldn't necessarily be there. So there's a lot of different people. They're actually called active mobility lanes these days to make the point that it isn't just about bikes. It's safer for them, of course. It's safer for people on sidewalks because there is a greater chance, not a perfect chance, but a greater chance that the bikes won't be on the sidewalk trying to avoid the fundamental unsafety of the road or the street. So it's safer for the sidewalk. It's also safer in terms of both statistically the chance of an accident and the intensity and consequences of the accident for the people in cars. It's literally safer for everyone. Truth. Streets and roads are very different. I'm going to get a little philosophical here for a minute, but I'm going to land this. There are roads. There are streets. How many people, raise your hand if you pretty much use the terms roads and streets interchangeably? Sometimes you say roads, sometimes you say streets, so a few people. I used to. I don't anymore because there is a big difference between the two. An urban street is a lot more than a road. Often, roads are pejoratively referred to as traffic sewers. And I'm one of the people who's been either credited or blamed, depending on your perspective, for this term. I only deserve credit or blame in the context of the English version. It was actually my Norwegian clients in Oslo who introduced me to the term. They don't use it as a pejorative. A lot of North Americans take it as a pejorative. They use it to describe the fact that it's a road designed like a pipe moving water or sewage to do one thing. Its job is to move water or sewage. And so a road or a freeway is just a traffic sewer. It's something designed to do one thing. They were surprised when I told them later that I've been saying it in English and people are taking it as a bit of a pejorative. It's very pragmatic to them. There is also a thing called stroads, which is the sort of overlapping combination of the two, which sort of picks up the worst aspects of either. And I'm going to give credit to my friend in the United States, Mike Lydon, who gave me some of these slides originally. These are some American examples. So stroads are, they take the worst elements, but there's opportunities to improve them, to either make them a road or a street, but usually it's in the context of transformation for streets. The American examples are horrendous, and the efforts to make roads more pedestrian friendly. Imagine free family fun. Imagine walking along there for your entertainment value for your kids. So it's always a bit amusing, but this is a few images from your stroads. You've got some pretty bad stroads. We were walking them and pointing them out. These are the ones that actually have desire lines. Desire lines is a phrase we use that shows you can tell where people wanted to be just from the wear and tear. So we call it a desire line because it shows you where people would like to walk and why aren't you putting infrastructure there. A lot of the places, there was no wear and tear because you'd be crazy to try to walk there. It's fundamentally dangerous on the side of your roads, and that's on your stroads. The goal is to have complete streets. The idea that you're moving a lot of different vehicle types safely and in an enjoying way. That is the basis of the vision in the new planning that's being done, a complete streets model. My friend Mike Lydon uses this nice simple analogy that a road does one thing like a butter knife, but a complete street is like a Swiss Army knife. It does many things. It has many roles. It has many tools. I've made the economic case of all the economic benefits of doing complete streets, because sometimes they are positioned as ideological. They are extremely pragmatic, including financially pragmatic. But the truth is that streets move people pretty easily. It's moving vehicles that's actually hard, because it's the vehicles that take up so much space. So in Oslo, Norway, for example, and it's game-changing when you perceive that the goal of transportation is to move people. But somewhere along the line, we made the goal of transportation to move cars. And there's actually a big difference. So this is a freeway that for my clients in Oslo, this was the infamous freeway that separated the fjord and the historic downtown in Oslo. If you've been to Oslo anytime, you've seen that it's probably the most powerful transformation of any world city, because they connected the fjord and they called it the Fjord City Plan. This is the iconic Oslo Opera House, and a whole bunch of city building, remarkable city building, that was built because they buried the freeway. And they connected it. They actually called that buried tunnel a traffic sewer. They tried to get the tunnel just removed, but it's a national highway, so they didn't have the ability to get it removed. So they buried it, and they replaced it with a multimodal boulevard, what we would call a complete street. And it has trams in the middle, it has bus-only lanes, it has separated bike lanes, it has wide sidewalks. And on top of that multimodal boulevard is the Oslo Opera House, a lot of office space. This is the famous barcode development. A huge amount of city building in the space where the highway used to be. Massive, this is public land, so the massive amounts of public return on investment is simply remarkable. And it's literally put them on the map in city building, in culture, in tourism, etc. And this multimodal boulevard moves more people than the old freeway did. In that relatively little space, comparatively speaking, it moves more people every day. You don't even know it when you're on it. It's a busy street. But when you think this is moving more people, it's because it's multimodal. It's because it's moving more people with less space. And when you realize and remember that the goal is to move people, not cars, why isn't this a no-brainer? It is in most places. And that's the whole idea of complete streets versus a single-purpose traffic sewer. This is why I'm telling you this story, because fundamentally, it's a missed opportunity that cities are not taking advantage of, certainly in North America, because we're stuck in ideology, or we haven't really thought through the math of it. Truth, streets are for a lot more than movement. I've been talking about moving people, not cars, but a street isn't just for movement. Do I need to tell you this? A street is a three-dimensional thing. This is New York City's analysis of all the things they think about in the context of the framing of the street. Because if you think about it, when we think about what a street, we're not just thinking about the carriageway, it's everything about the experience of that street. It's a three-dimensional place. And all the things we're trying to achieve, if it's you shopping, if it's you sitting and eating, if it's you interacting with a neighbor or just walking comfortably, all the things you're trying to do that isn't necessarily about movement, we need space for that. So I've said good cities know that streets are for people, not just cars, certainly movement. But great cities know that streets aren't just for movement. They're places to linger and live and not just move through. Cities that have that, I've worked on and done traffic and transportation plans that are placemaking plans because they realize if you're planning the street just as a place for movement, you're failing. Because streets are more than that. We all know that, right? We think about streets and what we love about great streets or not. The great streets we think about and picture do so many things: commerce, interaction, sociability, etc. So streets are, I'm going backwards. Truth, more movement choices means better accessibility. That is not necessarily what you hear in all contexts. There is quite a movement out there, ironically from people who are, is it still a reasonable term to use the word able-bodied? I'm not sure. But who are using the accessibility agenda to fight against multi-mobility. It's a successful tactic politically to attack because maybe they don't want to say war on the car. But what we know from accessibility experts, et cetera, is that, surprise, surprise, people with different physical challenges need choice, need options, because they aren't one size fits all. And so it makes accessibility better when you have choices. I flag this because I think you'll agree there's been a particular movement to sort of weaponize this in the conversations out there. Truth, the more people choose to walk, bike, take public transit, etc., the more it saves everyone money. If you're interested in money, pay attention. Including drivers who ironically are costing everyone else a lot more. This is the part drivers don't want to hear. But the truth of it is, when you're walking and biking and even taking public transit, although it's closer, you are saving the public money. Every kilometer you walk, bike, or take public transit, you're not only not costing the public money, you're saving the public money. You're including things like healthcare costs. So the healthier we are, one of the biggest single inputs into national budgets is healthcare costs. And when you're building activity into your daily life, you're saving healthcare costs. Countries have quantified this and done the math about how much active transport infrastructure saves in national public healthcare money, and it's in the billions of dollars a year. So if you walk, bike, or take public transit, you're saving money. If you're driving, you're not only costing everyone, but it's a lot. Every mile or kilometer you drive, you're being subsidized essentially by the people who are walking, biking, and taking public transit. That is the truth of it. And yet, how many times have you heard the narrative that says people on bikes should pay a tax because they aren't paying a gas tax or something like that? There's the narrative out there is that drivers are paying their way. It's everybody else who's freeloading. Every analysis, every study shows the opposite is true. Dramatically true. And from an economic development perspective, from a big picture, there is tremendous evidence that walking, biking, and transit infrastructure is a significant economic development advantage for cities. In some cities, like Montreal, it's actually a leg in their economic development strategy. It's a competitive edge against competing cities in attracting money, capital, talent, retaining young people. All the things we try to do from an economic development perspective, huge asset. There are companies that when they're doing their searches for cities for head offices or secondary head offices, in their list, and quite a few of them, I'm not making this sound like an outlier, insist on, you have to show that you have good bus transit, high-frequency bus transit, bike lanes, etc. And I've watched cities try to scramble to build bike lanes fast so they can compete for a head office. And then when they don't get the head office, they drop the bike plan, which if you think about it is really ridiculous because that means they're not going to be ready for the next one. But it's another way of thinking about how much it costs you to not do this and how much you gain if you do it. Truth, plans and vision statements can lie, but budgets always tell the truth. Since I'm on the topic of money, here's some more. A lot of the challenges in terms of what we're talking about with different ways of doing traffic, addressing traffic, comes down to where the budget goes. You can have the best vision in the world, but if the budget is disproportionately going to car space, which it almost always does in North American cities, then at most you're tweaking the situation. I've actually been hired by cities to assess their vision, their policies, and their budget, and their follow-through, and guess what? Usually massive disconnect. You can never achieve the thing you say you want because your budget is often the thing standing in the way. I've been saying this for many, many years. The truth about a city's aspirations isn't found in its vision statement or its official plan. It's found in its budget. And so cities, and this is something that's on Kingston's radar screen, have to do a better job of connecting the dots. Because if you have all the right ideas, but your money's in the wrong place, you fail. So too much public money is going into roads and not enough into streets. To make that distinction, too much public money is going to space for cars and not enough into every other way of getting around and every other thing we want to do in streets in the public realm. They get the leftover money and they get the leftover space. Car space never has to fight for space, never has to fight for budget. That's always the starting point. Everything else has to fight often against each other, with pedestrians fighting against people on bikes and public transit riders for the leftover space. That is the truth of it. I've seen it over and over. Truth, a big political challenge for better public transit. This is a switch to in gears. A big political challenge for better public transit in cities is ridership versus coverage. You have a certain amount. I wish our cities had more public transit investment. They should. And it should be stable investment so you can make long-term plans. But we don't have that right now, and probably won't in the foreseeable future. So that means you have a certain number of buses to buy and to operate. Where do you put them? Do you try to spread them and disperse them in a way where sort of everyone is within 5 minutes from a bus stop? There are plans in cities that say that's the goal. That's called the coverage model. There are other cities that say the best thing we can do for ridership, and thus lower greenhouse gas emissions and actually improve mobility in your city, is to concentrate on key corridors and run frequent buses. Because if you can get your frequency down to 10 minutes or less, that's when all of our analysis shows that's when people choose buses. And then when they're running to get one, if they miss it, they don't worry because they know the next bus is imminent. And not, God help us, 45 minutes away, and it doesn't even connect anything to anything. So this is one of the great tensions, one of the great debates. Kingston's already been making progress in emphasizing ridership. That is the right answer. The right answer, from the perspective of all of our goals and our crises, is to emphasize ridership. But there's this political challenge that happens when the question is, well, is that fair? And only coverage is fair because I want to be able to have a bus stop near me. The problem with that bus stop near you is it doesn't connect to anything immediately. You need to take 3 buses to get somewhere, and it comes every 45 minutes, maybe. That's the truth of it. And the public transit genius, my friend Jarrett Walker, points out that if you actually do ridership smartly, it actually covers coverage too. So you actually get both advantages. But you got to be willing to have that priority. You got to be willing to make that decision, which can sometimes be a tough political challenge. Too much public money is going to space for cars and not enough into every other way of getting around. That's the challenge. Wait a minute. Oh, I think I went backwards again. Sorry about that. So these are just some graphics to illustrate the point of ridership versus coverage. And you can see it's about efficiency and the ability to run frequent buses. This is one of my favorites. When Halifax went through this exercise, this was their marketing. And it kind of makes the point. It's a bit exaggerated, but it kind of makes the point about what you're trying to accomplish. Truth, bike lanes are an important part of this conversation, but not as big as some want you to think. Safe, protected bike infrastructure is a critical element of any good multimodal strategy. But there are political forces out there, media forces out there, et cetera, that want to say, oh, this is a bike plan in secret. We're talking about doing a transportation plan, and it's the first thing that you hear is somebody saying, I don't want to ride my bike. And that's because politically out there, I don't need to tell you, some people have shown a spotlight on bike lanes. And so it sort of sucks the oxygen out of every conversation about better transportation. So I'm here to tell you, you need to talk about bike infrastructure, but bike infrastructure isn't everything. And this isn't a bike advocates kind of ideological opportunity here. This is, again, a pragmatic approach to integrating bike infrastructure. And what I say is enough with bikes versus cars. It's about better cities. The proof all shows that if you actually want your city to function better, then get past this sort of fake news, false narrative, fake debate that has been prevalent for a while. By the way, that article I wrote in 2012, 13 years ago. We're still kind of in bikes versus cars, aren't we? So obviously my article failed. Bike lanes are an important... So, to put it bluntly, if you want to have any mode share improvement for bike infrastructure, which you should want for all the reasons I've been talking about, you need to be looking at protected, separated bike infrastructure. Do you have any of those yet? I don't think there's some that are, I would call them semi-protected. What did you? Yeah.
We have some, yes.
We have some. And I've seen some, but they're sort of semi-protected, is the way I would characterize it. If you have them fully protected, that's when you get the bike share, because that's when the people who aren't foolish enough to ride in unsafe conditions will consider it, including seniors, families with young children, etc. So if you're serious about wanting mode share, but you're still trying to do it with painted bike lanes, and one of my lines is paint isn't infrastructure, then you're not serious. You're not serious about really raising your bike infrastructure. The cities that are not only doing it separated, but are looking with to achieve what's called AAA, all ages and abilities, because you want to get to the point where anybody should have the opportunity to choose this if they want to and not be fundamentally putting their life in danger unreasonably. So there's all sorts of conversations about that. One of the things I like to illustrate is that it's become political. This has been, for a long time, a very pragmatic conversation, but lately, in recent years, it's become political. Bike lanes have now become part of what team you're on in terms of politics. But what I like to point out is the former city I planned for, Calgary, did the best bike minimum grid network pilot that I've ever seen in North America a number of years ago. The pilot was virtually perfect. They took a council that only passed the pilot by one vote to try this. You know what a pilot is? It's basically you put it in temporarily, and you measure before and after, and you assess whether or not it was successful. They ran essentially a perfect pilot because not only did they do a fantastic job of identifying the before and after, which is a big mistake a lot of cities make, but they reported even halfway through interim successes and such. And they did such a convincing, incredible job that in Calgary, oil country Calgary, the vote to make it permanent was unanimous. Went from one vote to pass the pilot. And then Edmonton, which competes with Calgary in more than just hockey, was jealous, in my opinion. I love the power of competition. Was jealous about the amount of attention that Calgary was getting. So they upped the ante and said, we're going to just do the same thing. We're not even going to have a pilot. They built a downtown network. Alberta's two main cities, Calgary and Edmonton, did this because of the business case, the evidence. They're very evidence-focused in those two cities. And I often say, in cities that are described to me as conservative, I've often heard that Kingston can be considered a conservative city. You're not as conservative as Calgary and Edmonton. And cities like that are actually good at not getting past the ideology and focus on the pragmatism. To me, if Calgary and Edmonton can do this and see the benefit of it, I have a hard time accepting the excuses of other cities. Truth. Parking is really important for all of this too, but I'm not going to get deeply into parking. I know we could talk an hour just on that. I will say that the good news is Kingston has done a good chunk of the hard work on this already. Because a few years ago, in the context of the zoning bylaw, the new zoning bylaw, we did an exercise called the Power of Parking. We had a few months long, intense public discourse and conversation about parking, dispelled, like we're doing in this context, a lot of the myths about parking, tried to get people to think a little differently about what the real parking problems were as opposed to what's perceived or said in the media, and got a lot of attention, deliberately because we wanted to get that attention because we were trying to change the conversation. And even American publications were saying, steal this idea about an innovation from a relatively small Canadian city. So some of the hard work, a lot of the hard work around the parking, the P word, the third rail of political conversations in this context has already been done. So that's helpful as we are going through the transportation plan process. So last truth. I know you're thinking, God, how many truths are there in his PowerPoint? Last truth, and this is kind of a sum up. We need better and fewer cars, less driving, more choices, better communities, and stronger cities. All of that is going to take everything I thought of for this PowerPoint and probably some things that I'm going to kick myself for not thinking of as soon as I leave the room or get home. But you can see why, hopefully, there's a need to have a blunt conversation about a lot of these things to at least get you to start thinking differently. You don't have to agree with everything you've heard tonight, but the goal is to get you to start just considering the idea. Maybe you heard some things put in a way tonight that are different than what you might have heard before or what you might have thought before. That's the point of this. So the question is, can you handle the truth? Okay, I know I was a little loopy when I put this slide in last night, and hopefully tonight I haven't come across like that. But there is, in all seriousness, there is often a question, is a city ready for a truthful conversation like this? Because this is a hard conversation to have. And we've made it extra hard with unprecedented misinformation and political wedge issues, etc. But hopefully, we can have a great plan because we've had a better conversation about it amongst all of you in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we've learned some new words, Strouds being one of them, and I, for one, am not loosening my belt. Now that I've become stout, my belt is could we perhaps bring the screen up while a few questions are being taken and we get the panel ready? So I know that there's some maneuvering going to happen while we ask Brent a few questions. So would there be anyone who wishes to talk about Strouds? Yes, I think we'll bring a mic to you. I don't know. Oh, they're excited. No mic? Okay, so everyone can hear you.
You might, if we want the YouTube folks to be able to hear the questions and answer, I'm sorry, we might need the mic. Yes.
You were talking about the Strodes. How do you handle deliveries in that situation?
Well, in what situation? Where you're sort of transforming a Strode?
If you've got all of those different modes of travel going down one avenue,
Yes.
like you had the streetcar, the buses, the walkers, and so on, how do you handle deliveries to the businesses going on behind or whatever?
I can tell you it's one of many considerations that get a lot of attention, and it's usually contextual. Sometimes it can be, sometimes there's side lanes and side streets or side alleys where the deliveries happen. Sometimes it's even underground in the context of some of these more larger master planned areas. But the solutions vary, but trust me when I say few issues get a bigger amount of attention than that. Almost a disproportionate amount of attention, but those questions get answered, sometimes at the expense of other aspirations you actually want to achieve too, because you can't do something else because of what you need to do for loading. But trust me when I say those issues get addressed, or deliveries and such.
Don't worry, we'll run for the microphone. Beat ya. Got it. Here you go. Another brave soul. You're on YouTube after all. Yes, we've got these two gentlemen. Go ahead. I say gentlemen.
It was a powerful presentation, and it's a really important message to get out, so thank you.
Thank you.
It was great. I've always said that there isn't a fiscal conservative or anywhere that would support the current pattern, the status quo of investment in private vehicles, moving private vehicles. But if they understood the true cost, but my question is a little more technical. It's about the impact on the municipal budget, the tax assessments.
Yes.
Related to low density development, particularly big box retail.
Okay.
So if you took the RioCan Center here and it was developed to medium density development, and it was a more walkable neighborhood, what's the difference there? Like, I don't quite understand how assessments work, but my sense is that big box retail kind of erodes the tax base. Not only the roads that have to deliver the people to the site, but...
So the question is about, are there certain land use decisions, densities, uses like big box retailers, et cetera, that erode the tax base? We know that for a fact. It's not well known in the common discussion, and some people are actually quite bothered when it's public. But it's well known in professional circles that when you do an actual tax generation assessment, looks at, and when you combine it with municipal cost, what the public has to pay versus what the public gets in the form of taxes, some parts of every city subsidize other parts of the city. So the downtown in York City, you've done one of these analyses before. It's the spike graphs that sort of show up and down, the places that are net negative and the places that are net positive. And to put it bluntly, because we're telling the truth here, the higher density mixed use places generate much more taxes per square foot and essentially are critically necessary to subsidize the low density parts of the city. If you live in a low density part of the city, you are being subsidized by the urban parts of the city. So as I often say, if you never go downtown, if you never go to the urban places, you should still thank them and want investment in those areas, because without them, you wouldn't have your services. You probably wouldn't even have your home, because the actual decision to build that wouldn't happen without the assumption that the other parts of the city are essentially paying for it. And this is something that we don't commonly know, and you tend to complain, why does the downtown get capital budget money, and why doesn't my neighborhood? Well, your neighborhood is getting benefit from investment in the downtown because it's essentially subsidizing your services and such, which you wouldn't be able to pay based on the taxes you generate. That's just a fact. But I've seen suburban communities get very upset with that fact, because you don't want to feel like you're being subsidized. So there's all sorts of excuses made for that can't be right. But it's well established. So from a does growth pay for itself perspective, and this is related to both land use and transportation, so it relates to the two plans being done to a certain extent, because you're always trying to figure out how we're going to pay for this. You have to think about leaning in on the places that not only pay for themselves, but are a net benefit from a tax perspective. And you have to understand the other places that are a net negative, because that's just a deep cost as opposed to an investment that has a return on investment. That's the truth, but the few things I found are a harder conversation than that, because people who think they're paying their way, and it's part of their self-identity that they're paying their way, can get extremely upset by the notion that they're essentially being subsidized by the places that they've complained get too much public money.
Just one more quick question.
We wanted to get a chance for the panel also to respond, so we're going to follow up to your question. Can you hold on to? He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and we do want to make sure everybody gets a chance for a question.
Then we're going to involve him in the discussion. And I'm going to ask you, you got first up, can I have the panel of you respond? And then
Sure.
go right to you afterwards. Are you okay with that? Excellent. Just so we can kind of get him to weigh in a bit.
Was I not supposed to answer that? Are we going to the panel now?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
I just want to get them in the
Sure.
fire here too, so you get to hold that microphone. Two nice things into when you get there. So I'm not going to introduce Ian Seppel. Why not? He's the director of transportation. I'm not going to introduce Paige. She is your commissioner. You can't hear me. You want me to go to the microphone, so I'm not going to introduce Paige either. I am actually, but not in any time. So Paige is a commissioner of growth and development. She's leading a lot of work here at the city on sustainable communities and official plan. Ian, I know has been referenced. He's not the guy who didn't build the bike lane for you. He's another guy. doing transportation is a key to what he's working on. I do want to just take a moment to introduce Amy and Megan, because they're going to actually respond also to a question around what some of might have resonated with Brent in your talk, and then we'll also have a chance for everyone else to participate in the room. So thank you for that indulgence. So Amy Krasnozem is a public health nurse. She's going to give us a wave. Thanks, Amy. With the Southeast Health Unit, where she works on the Healthy Communities team. Her work focuses on health promotion and injury prevention, including advancing healthy public policy, strengthening community partnerships, and creating supportive environments. She has a master's degree in health evaluation from the University of Waterloo. She has an undergraduate degree in nursing science and psychology from where else? Queen's University. Outside of her work, she enjoys running, cycling, playing golf, and exploring with her dog Oscar, who's amazing. I love Oscar. We're neighbors, so I get to see him a lot. Megan Quinn, I know you were nodding a lot, Megan. I think lots of people were nodding in some of the conversation, is a longtime Kingston resident and a graduate of Queen's University, where she earned a degree in geography with a focus on environmental and planning issues. She's an active member of Kingston's Municipal Advisory Committee and an advocate for inclusive public spaces. Her focus on sustainability, inclusion, and play is shaped by her lived experience as a person with disabilities, and her passion for accessible parks, infrastructure, and policies reflects her commitment to creating spaces for people of all ages and abilities. So we really welcome this panel to kind of kick us off in our discussion. And I've been given the task of asking them a question, Brent. So the question I get to ask the team here, we're going to start with the answers. We're going to go left to right. Okay. So we'll put Ian on the spot first. Sure. So Brent has provided a wide range of concepts and examples this evening about how approaches to traffic and transportation have short and long-term implications for community building. What would be the key concept from your perspective, and you are on YouTube, that would be important for the community to embrace? Ian, do you have a thought? Is there something that really resonated with you that you think is really critical for Kingston?
Thank you, Sue. I think from my perspective, in my role working in transportation and transit with the city, there's two elements in Brent's presentation as it relates to our city that I think about all the time. And that is, the first is around how relatively short the vast majority of our trips are. And then also that concept that I heard a lot of people sort of murmuring and talking about during Brent's presentation related to the streets and the roads and the stroads. And we do have a lot of stroads. And one of the inherent things that is part of that infrastructure is the barriers that they create. And the barriers not only to sort of access and safety, but also the barriers to choice in the trip that you can make and what you're going to choose. And I think we see that reflected in the types of trips that people are taking in those short trips and how many of those trips are by car. And in the longer term, as I think about that from the city and when we're thinking about our planning and the way our infrastructure is going to change, I'm driven by how those trips and those shorter trips should be happening in a way that is not dependent on the car.
Great. Ian, thank you so much. Paige, you're next up. What sort of resonated with you as something that was quite unique?
I would say the work that we've done with Brent, because he's been advising us for a long time, and it's definitely very evident in a lot of the talk that was presented this evening, is as a land use planner, of course, my focus is looking at the connection between transportation planning and land use planning. And the city hasn't done a good job of that for a long time, and it's taken us a long time to get to where we are. Brent has been critical in helping to push the integration and the collaboration between Ian's group and my group, the engineering group as well. And we're finally at a place where these things are really starting to move and gel together. And the fact that we are delivering a plan that's truly integrated, we're also doing that with the wastewater master plan, is very, very important. It's taken a long time for us to get here as a team. Certain things had to go faster, other things had to go slower to be able to get the cycles and the right synchronization between the groups and the work that's going on. And I think where we're going as a city is super, super exciting. Looking at the way that we're fundamentally arranging and making land use decisions in relation to that multimodal living. We're doing that much more intentionally now, and I think you're going to see that very clearly reflected in the new plan that's coming forward. The first draft of that plan will become available this summer, and we're really excited to be on the cusp of getting ready to share that. And I think the focus on those pieces and making sure that we're in the future building at the community much more intentionally with looking at the land uses, your everyday needs, and how we're arranging those very strategically so that we don't have things as spatially separated. We're integrating them in with the transportation choices so that people are able to access a lot more within close proximity to where they live. Again, not eliminating the car, telling people that you can't drive. Certainly that's always going to be part of things, but we're just being way more intentional about the way that we bring these things together in a way that the city has never done before in its history, and it's super exciting where we're going. So I take a lot from the presentation on those points. Certainly it's influenced our work really strongly, and we're really grateful to be in the place we're in now, and a great plan that's coming to the community really soon.
Excellent, thank you. I was going to repeat the second half of the question. So what would be the key concept from your perspective that would be important for our community to embrace? And that would be going to Amy and to Megan. Amy.
Thank you, Sue. From a public health perspective, the concept of moving people, not cars, would be most important. Planning for people considers the needs, health, and well-being of residents while prioritizing pedestrian safety, comfort, accessibility, connectivity, and opportunities for community building. Planning for people is an opportunity to build a complete community through mixed land use that supports walking and cycling and the use of public transit over the reliance of cars. When residents have basic amenities and services within walking distance of home, a complete community provides daily opportunities to connect to more people in the neighborhood and provide a sense of place and belonging for those who live there. Complete communities recognize the importance of accommodating a diverse range of travel choices, ensuring that our roads and paths are welcoming and safe to pedestrians, cyclists, and users of all abilities, with accessible, walkable local shops, green spaces, community hubs. In-person social connections are more frequent, fostering community building. Consider how the presence or absence of sidewalks, safe, well-lit crosswalks, and vehicle speeds and volume can influence your decisions about how you live, how you travel, and how you interact with your neighborhood and community. The presence of heavy traffic can create a sense of uneasiness and can limit our community interaction. Planning for people and complete communities go hand in hand, and it's an important growth strategy that offers numerous health benefits. Supports for active living and increased physical activity, leading to reduced risk of chronic disease, social connectedness, and a vibrant neighborhood life that supports physical and social well-being, reduced air pollution, slowing the rate of climate change impacts. With the upcoming new official and integrated mobility plan, we are in a great position to improve social well-being of local communities through thoughtful land use planning, transportation planning, and community design. So by prioritizing the people, creating complete communities, we can create a place where people know their neighbors, they feel motivated to get involved, build relationships, contribute to the creation of strong social networks, and design a place that prioritizes well-being and reaps rewards of healthier, more fulfilled citizens.
Great, thank you. Resonating a lot of the key themes that Brent was highlighting in his talk. That's excellent. Now, to you, never last. Of course, please go ahead, Megan.
Okay, I set up my mic last, so I just want to make sure we're still good with it. Okay, we're good. I really think that the attitudinal portion is really important about this, about the idea of how people get around and why. An assumption a lot of people will make is that, oh, everybody who's disabled requires a vehicle to get around. And that point you made about people weaponizing the discourse of, oh, but some people are going to need to park their cars, which is true. There are going to be people who require an automobile for their mobility, but there's also people who, because of the nature of their disability, cannot drive and will not ever drive. And they also have mobility needs like getting groceries and doing laundry and all those lovely things. But right now it seems that there's enough people convinced that disabled people don't ride bikes. Well, we do, but sometimes our bikes look different. Or disabled people don't, independently go out and do their laundry. And we do. I just take it in a hand cart because it's a bit hard to navigate the sidewalks downtown with a load of stuff. I'm sure anyone who's walked downtown has experienced some of our historic sidewalks, which are charming. However, it's fair for people to know it's a beautiful walk, but you gotta be aware of where you're walking because there's lots of little places to trip in. And like when we can build an environment where people can get around independently, whether that's people who are disabled, people who are older, people who lost a license, or they don't want to drive anymore. Also, the entire demographic of not allowed to drive yet, which are children who have a place to go every day, which is school, in addition to all the places they want to go, like parks. So ultimately, I just think that this more broad perspective on who moves to where and why is going to be really important for the city to embrace. We're not just, a bunch of male commuters going to and from the workplace. We are, mothers going to the park with the kids, and we are families who are meeting up with other families for a waterfront trip, and we're buying groceries and doing all sorts of things that are not just measuring that one metric. So I'm excited that we're going to be considering the level of service and such for all of us, including those who are most vulnerable to the effects of cars, us vulnerable users outside the cars.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you, both of you, all four of you. I know that you have the microphone. You've got it clutching it, holding on to it. The question you hopefully haven't forgotten. A comment, a reflection.
Reflection. So we talk about moving people, which is really important, but I was wondering about the statistics around the changing in our lifestyle, which is Amazon is doing deliveries every day in my neighborhood, and Uber Eats or Dash or whatever you want to call it these days. I am shocked to go into any local, usually fast food place, and there's more people lined up to collect stuff to deliver than there are guys in the restaurant. So how's that impacting our decisions and how we're doing things?
And this is for Ian? Or was this for Brent?
Or for Brent, yep.
I'm well aware.
Yeah.
It's for Brent, thank you.
I'll take some of Brent, but if Ian has some thoughts on it.
It's not going to surprise you that my answer is it's changing things a lot, but it's not necessarily getting better. The assumption is that somehow that will translate into fewer trips. It's different trips, and maybe even not by humans. Have you seen the pilot that's going to be run in Markham with the cute little robots that will be on our sidewalks? So these can be. And I was watching 3 journalists just gush about how cute the robots were and wondering if the food would stay hot or cold. And there was only a passing comment about the thought that these are going to be interacting on sidewalks with people with challenges. I have some visual issues, but even just anyone with the sheer number of things that are competing for space. It's one more thing competing for space. So trips are changing. And we have to factor that in, but it's not making things easier, and it's not necessarily taking trips off the road, or it's not necessarily taking trips off the road in a way that's necessarily positive. So we're all scrambling. The cities that are smart are being proactive and thinking not reactive in a way of how do I regulate this after, frankly, they've already appeared. And too many cities are just saying, let them come, and then we may or may not regulate if there's a problem, which is not a way to do it. That's the opposite of planning. That's reacting, and sometimes even reacting badly. The ones that are thoughtful are sort of saying, here's how the city will benefit from this technology and avoid the negative potential consequences. You think scenarios thinking in terms of what the potential negative consequences are, you proactively mitigate and address those. Doesn't that sound sort of obvious? But there's something about tech that breaks people's brains and City Hall's brains, where they sort of, you're almost not allowed to question tech because, as I said earlier, you're questioning progress. But all of these things, whether it's scooters and whether they're scattered or docking stations, or almost every micro-mobility opportunity, and many of them have challenges in the context of changing trips. Same with deliveries and the nature of online shopping. So we can either react, and often badly, or we can be proactive, which is obviously my recommendation for cities. And there are cities that have done that. Vancouver, my city, being one of them.
Brent, thank you so much. I know I'm going to come back to you. I just want to see, there's Holly, I think you had your hand up. After you know Holly.
Was there anything you wanted
go ahead.
to add?
Yeah, no, we'll go to the next question.
And then you're welcome to offer a comment or maybe something that resonated from what the panel was saying as well. You've got some really great perspectives up here. Think it's on? Maybe not?
Is this on?
There it is.
There we go.
Good evening. My name's Holly. Just to comment on the last part. As a past delivery driver, I can definitely appreciate the challenges that come with short-term delivery. So just an interesting question. So my question tonight for the panel is, what are some key things that land use planning and urban design consultants can do at a site level to contribute to a healthier community and better people movement, including accessibility?
Great. Thank you for the question, Holly. Who would like to jump in?
Do you want to speak to that first?
Sure, I can.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the most important things we're doing specifically, if we want to talk about downtown Kingston, and downtown Kingston is also an area where we've had a tremendous amount of growth, whether we're talking about the Princess Corridor, we've seen new growth on Queen Street as well. And that's where we're also having difficulty with delivery. So that was a very interesting issue to come up. And what we have done relative to some new policy we've written is requiring dedicated parking spaces for those short-term deliveries right out front of buildings. Now, that's new policy, so it hasn't translated into new construction yet, but it is part of the new policy section. The challenge becomes with that, of course, too, is whether people are going to adhere to it, and we don't have people just standing on the street making sure that buildings and drivers are utilizing the appropriate dedicated spaces, so they're not just stopping in the middle of the street, putting on their four-ways or going dangerously across the sidewalk and compromising the pedestrian experience. So we are very much in flux and trying to figure out that problem as a city as things evolve and we see the proliferation of at-home deliveries for all different types of pieces across the city. In terms of your question, Holly, I think, again, when we're talking about some of these highly urbanized corridors, some of the best things we're doing right now are really pulling buildings back and really, again, reprioritizing the pedestrian experience. I think the city for a very long time was not planned with that view. To the extent that it was. And to Megan's point, in downtown in particular, we have a lot of older streets and deficient right-of-ways where the sidewalks are very, very narrow. So the one good thing that comes with redevelopment is the opportunity to widen those spaces and to design them in a much more intentional, pedestrian-focused way or multimodal way, and less emphasis on the car. We definitely still are planning for cars, but I would say for many, many years, the city was very car-oriented in its focus altogether and how it was planned. And of course, before amalgamation, it was 3 separate cities that were kind of planned independent of one another. So with time, we're trying to stitch together the city into a cohesive whole. And in often cases, we're going into existing built environments and having to remove what's there and replace it with something new that's reflective of these qualities. So as you're working with clients, certainly pedestrian focus and thinking about the way buildings are landing at grade, what that experience is like for the users of the building, but the people on the street as well. As we plan for the infrastructure, we do get a lot of pushback on the bicycle infrastructure and oftentimes building owners saying, well, my tenants are never going to use it. But if we never provide the choice, how do you know? So those are the types of things that I think when you're working in the industry is working along the city with respect to those goals and promoting that within your projects is a really great place to start.
One of the key themes that Brent highlighted was choice. How do we get to choice? And maybe for those of you here, I mean, if you have an idea of what you think that choice could be and how we get to that choice, because these are really important. You've listened, you've heard, you have lived experience as well. If you have thoughts about how the city can benefit from what you might be observing would be terrific. Do you want to come on? We'll go to you first, and then we can come to this side of the room too.
Thanks, Brett. I was the guy that biked my toddler to daycare in the winter through the snowstorms. I didn't like your truth that bikes aren't the answer, but yes, it is a truth. More for the city. I appreciate the things we've been doing with speed reduction, particularly being one of the, in the East End, one of those urban areas. The 40 that will eventually come soon will be great. But a big lived experience thing I run into is changes to limits without changing geometry of the road. So I mean, just changing the sign is great, but that doesn't necessarily change driver behaviors. And how can we as citizens kind of highlight where we're having those difficulties?
Can we go to Ian for that?
Sure. Thank you for your question. So that is that's an excellent observation, and I think it certainly a change in a sign and a change in a speed limit without a change in the inherent design of the roadway it's the complete solution. We have over 1,100 kilometers of local streets in our urban, suburban, and rural parts of our city. And most of those streets were constructed in the last 50 or 60 years. And they are car-centric and car-focused streets or roads. And practically, it is going to take us a long time to rebuild those streets and those roads to reflect the policies that we're talking about today. But there are ways that we can get at that incrementally, and there are some that are better than others. And so changing a speed limit on a single block versus changing a speed limit within a neighborhood, layering in feedback and enforcement and education elements around schools, gateway signage, neighborhood sort of calming programs. These are some of those incremental tools that we are trying to layer in along with the citywide and the neighborhood-wide speed reduction. But I completely agree with you that the ultimate goal is that as those streets are reconstructed or as new streets are created, the design of those streets to a motorist compels them to travel slower. But in the interim, with all of the sort of system that we have now, we're looking at all of the tools that we have available to us to look at reducing those speeds. So it's this reduction in our city is a relatively recent reduction. So the citywide speed limit in our neighborhoods is moving from 50 kilometers an hour to 40, and that's rolling out across the city over an 18-month, 24-month period. And in our school areas, our community safety zones, many of those areas are going from 40 kilometers an hour down to 30 kilometers an hour. And we are piloting automated speed enforcement. We are layering in traffic calming elements. But it is a long path ahead based on all of the infrastructure that we have now.
Thank you for the question and for the comments. And I know you had your hand up. So Nolan is going to run on over there with the mic, or not run, walking carefully.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Brent. I agree 100% with everything you say. I'm representing Williamsville District here as its co-chair. Does the city have any plans to turn the speedways of Brock and Johnson into two-way streets?
Interesting question. So for those who are listening on YouTube, we have two one-way streets that connect going downtown and throughout the whole city. So the question is there any future plan to maybe make those two-way streets? Maybe that's an offer of something that you'd like to have encouraged? Something.
Well, I can tell you they're very dangerous. I've asked for numbers of deaths. I know of several in the last few years that have occurred on those streets. There are two schools on either side of those two speedways. One is a French language school and the other is an English one, both public schools. That means elementary school kids have to move from one side to the other every day. I bike them regularly. They're pretty dangerous to bike down the sides, with sometimes going into a shared lane. The traffic is zooming. The speed indicators do nothing. There are people who actually like to get them to flash, slow down. There are people doing well over 55.
So it's a really important question, and I know that the city has hired also HDR and TAC Consulting to do their IMP, so they're working closely on all of this stuff, and I'm sure that's something they'll look at. And I think, Ian, maybe you had an observation or a comment on that, because it's a key piece to at least look at.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Annette. So looking at all of our streets, the classification of our streets and the way that they are operating now is part of the study that is underway with the IMP. So I can't say that there is a specific initiative to convert those two streets you were talking about, Brock and Johnson, into something different. That will come as part of the studies as we sort of progress. But I hear your observations, and I know we've had a lot of conversations about it, and we've had a lot of conversations in the community about that. And that fits into how the streets are used now versus how those streets will change to reflect the priorities that are coming in the plan in the future.
I wonder how many deaths it's going to take.
I was just going to add something of
Yeah,
the language that we'd said about that. that connects the city. For me, those streets divide the city. That's the set of intersections I can't cross. In fact, one of the times I've been hit in this city is on that very intersection at Barrie and Johnson. And I can't avoid it because I live downtown. I've got to pass through that area. And yeah, I concur with the idea that we can be even more bold in our ways of protecting lives. You know, I hate to be an inconvenience to somebody, but I would love to be able to get around alive. That's all.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I just wanted to put that on the record. With all due respect, my friends.
Brent, did you have a comment you want to make?
As a former chief planner, you're often put in a situation where you know what you want to say, but you also have to be careful what you're allowed to say at a particular point in a thought process. So have some sympathy for Ian's situation here, because I do know what Ian and I have talked about the issue of one-way streets, and so he has to be careful. I don't. So what I can say is that I could have easily put conversion of one-way pairs to two-way streets as a truth. It's a good thing that a number of cities are finally, I grew up, after initially being raised in Perth, not that far from here, I moved to Hamilton, which is the king of one-way streets, as you may know. And I went back with Paige and I keynoted a conference there. And I'm 56 years old, and they are converting one-way streets. My entire life I have been waiting, my entire adult life, and it's finally happening. So we are finally at the point. We've been talking about the advantages of one-way conversion of one-way to two for a long time. It's finally starting to happen. And I know, and you know, I won't speak for Ian, but don't think he's standing in the way of it. There's just always a process and a conversation that has to happen. When you look at it from the perspective of the lenses we're talking about, we're in a much more favorable condition to have that conversation now than at any other point in my career, is my observation.
Brent, thank you so much. I know it's just after 8. If I could have your indulgence for 10 more minutes to have some more conversation, and then we will wrap, because we appreciate that you have other things you need to do this evening as you walk home or go wherever we're going. So I'm going to go to you, and then I also want to come back to the gentleman with the blue shirt. I'm not sure what mics are snapping. How many mics are there in the room? There we go. You've got the mic. Hi.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. This is more specifically for Brent, but always to any of you. You talked about how suburbia needs to be worked around rather than using the same urbanism plans as you would a downtown. But do we not see suburbia as an issue that needs to be fixed instead of tailored to differently? Like if you look on a satellite view, not just our city, but any city, the suburbia looks like a bowl of spaghetti. Like it's just not efficient use of space. And I'm not saying we need to kick anybody out of their single family homes.
Listen,
but
I get the point. There's two truths that can be true at the same time. Does sprawl need to change? Absolutely. There's staggering truckloads of evidence to suggest the costs that are rarely understood, the costs and consequences to sprawl. And I don't call all suburbia sprawl, but too much of suburbia is sprawl. And the main condition of sprawl is car dependency. There is no reason why suburbs have to be car dependent. That's just the way we've been doing them. So I am careful, because on the one hand, if you say you're going to treat your suburb like you want it to become downtown, people think you're crazy. And there's appropriateness to that, because you're out of touch with reality. And I don't think urbanists do themselves a service when they talk that way, or we talk that way, because I am one, of course. So that is true, but it's also true that, of course, suburbia needs to change in a rather dramatic way. We need parts of suburbs that are going to urbanize, particularly around public transit, and those are the urbanizing parts of suburbs that will be treated like urban places. They will have urban expectations associated with them, maybe prioritization in the context of what I showed. There are other parts that are still going to be more suburban, but they don't have to be sprawl. They don't have to be car dependent. So there's a way you can do better, smarter suburbs. We know how to do it. We've known how to do it for a long time. We just haven't been. So all of those things can be true at the same time. But I say it the way I say it is because if you're interpreted as saying, well, I just want to make everybody's suburb like downtown, that is easily weaponized to attack your plan and to attack your exercise. So I'm very specific with my language.
Yeah, I wasn't implying that all suburbia needs to go away, but it's just interesting how we romanticize the downtown living of how you can walk to anywhere within 5 to 10 minutes, but we just don't do more of it.
Well, remember, people romanticize the suburbs too. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm an urbanist by nature, but I'm very aware of the fact that I watch urbanists talk about the socialization in the suburbs and how everybody's separated, and I've heard suburbanites say, "What are you talking about? I know all my neighbors. We pop into each other. When the garage doors open, I come over for a beer. I walk places in my cul-de-sac." And so you get into this ideological debate about which one is better, and different people have different perspectives. And it's wasting of time and energy to get into arguments like that, I've realized in my 55, 56 years. What's better to do is just tell the truth about the costs and consequences that are rarely part of that conversation. Because the truth is that lifestyle is being subsidized by everyone else. That it does have costs and consequences on everything from affordability to climate change, etc. And so there's a better way to do it. Is what I've learned is a more useful conversation. Because if we're just getting into ideology, it might make you feel good to have that debate, is what my experience is, but it rarely actually wins in the context of a political debate when political elected people will make decisions at the end of the day. You're much better to put it in the context of real costs and consequences, because I find that's more effective.
Could I comment on that?
Absolutely.
Just in the context of the work that's under draft right now for the new plan and how the new plan will address some of the commentary that you've made with respect to particularly existing suburbs, but then also new areas that have yet to be developed that may be more suburban in their character. So I would say with respect to anything that's net new, the way the plan has been laid out is really setting an entirely different expectation for how those areas develop. We use the concept, and some of that was in Brent's presentation. One of the big ideas is around complete communities. So you're not going to see areas, new areas of the city build out that would be reminiscent of 1960s or 70s subdivisions that are entirely car dependent. They're not connected to anything. There's no small scale amenities that are available. The new concept of what you will see in new areas will be very much different than that. But what do we do with what's existing? And,
Right.
and that's where, the consultation through the plan becomes really critical, because our community has different tolerance for thresholds of change. And there's some people that would be very keen to welcome maybe things like small scale commercial into existing areas, that we're talking about reintroducing that from maybe key corners within a neighborhood that's existing. In some communities, they're allowing that within the entire neighborhood, whether it's a corner or not. So there's some of those concepts that, again, that create the walkability, more of the completeness of existing areas, so they're not entirely car dependent, and then how that overlays with the transportation plans that we're building with Ian's group, the implementation of the active transportation network, the neighborhood connections that, again, provide more choice to move people out of their neighborhoods onto arterial roads where they can have access to greater pieces. So we're tackling it in two ways. Again, it's draft policy, but we really need to hear from people, again, because what's net new is sometimes easier to accept as something that's coming new into the community. But what's harder is to retrofit an existing area with new concepts where it's different from the way people have experienced their area. And in some ways, they like it very much the way that it is. So hearing from you on the plan would be fantastic in that respect, and look forward to hearing from other people as well.
Thank you very much.
You're not wrong in what you're saying, and we're on the same page. It's a much bigger challenge to retrofit the suburbs. We've been talking about that for a few decades now, and it's probably the hardest thing you can do in urbanism. So we need new tactics, and we need different ways of having the conversation.
I'm going to go to this gentleman with the blue shirt, because I know I promised you we'd come back to you, and then you might be our final question or comment.
It strikes me that the big box parking ratios are quite high. Mm-hmm. Is there, and even some of the smaller strip development, is there any direction that the city's taking to densify through mixed-use development? Is that in the current zoning, or will that be a future direction that the city will take?
I'm happy to speak to that. Absolutely. So is it in the current zoning? No. In the new official plan, we're looking at, as you said, we have a lot of commercial areas in the city and east, west, downtown, that there's a tremendous amount of surface parking. And what we're seeing, I think, in the community and the continuous change with like big box retail, people's preferences, online shopping, at-home delivery, we're seeing a lot of vacancies in those spaces. So certainly as part of the plan, the power centers on Gardner's Road, looking at the Cataraqui Mall, looking at the Kingston Center, where we have areas that have lots of underutilized space, engaging with the property owners, and certainly the city's vision would to see a lot of densification and mixed use, maybe the integration of residential in some of those locations, certainly as part of the future plan, and those are parts of what's early drafted that will be out for consultation this summer.
When we did the first power parking, I think we were fairly public in our comment that although that work was mostly about multifamily housing, and we made the deliberate decision that we weren't going to address commercial yet, because we were still relatively in the middle of the pandemic. Commercial operations were being massively hit if you remember. And the decision was made they didn't need to have another shock to their confidence in terms of staying in business at that particular time. But we telegraphed at the time that part of the conversation would come. Because we all know that if you're worried about overbuilding a parking, especially based on municipal rules, commercial parking is one of the biggest categories of that. But we also have to remember that a lot of the malls that you think of that are radically overparked, or power centers that are radically overparked, it's not because of the minimum parking requirements of the city. Their numbers actually dramatically exceed the minimum parking requirement. They're building to, as we were talking about the other day, they're building to the one day a year. It used to be Boxing Day or the day before Christmas, now it's Black Friday, that they perceive that parking needed for that one single day. And the rest of the time in the year, it's empty. And that's why cities are often talking about maximum parking requirements rather than just having minimum requirements. But it wasn't the right time during the power parking to have that conversation. I think I think we stand by that decision, because we have to remember what things were like in the pandemic.
Okay, Ian, I think you had one final comment, and then I'm going to thank everybody, all the YouTube audience people.
Thank you for that question, and I think it is an opportunity, as Paige was talking, and it links into the question that was asked to you before as well, because those parking areas and those vast private parking areas that are in these areas around the city also present one of the greatest opportunities for that intensification, for a change that can appear in some of those suburban areas. And it builds into some of the pieces that Amy was talking about at the beginning as well. That's where that opportunity exists to start to create some of those complete communities, to create those connections into those suburban neighborhoods. So the way in which these plans and these approaches are being linked together starts to move away from thinking of it as a site and how that site will redevelop, and what will be the fabric that's there that creates the community, that allows for those connections, that allows for those choices that we've been talking about. And that's where that transformation will potentially more easily happen in some of the suburban areas because of the availability of that space relative to sort of reconstruction in some of the more denser areas.
Great, thank you. So I want to start by thanking our audience globally for dialing into our fabulous sitting and hopefully sharing and learning from Brent's talk, from our panel, and from each of your questions. I wanted to start and thank Megan, of course, and Amy for your thoughtful and very candid conversation and response to some of the things that are really important to you. Paige and Ian, who are leading a lot of this important work for the city that will be continuing on as the integrated mobility plan and really kind of gets some muster going and some engagement, and also the official plan as that first draft comes out this summer. To all of you here, you're here because you care, and you care because you want to hear new ideas and you want to try new things. So please continue to be engaged, particularly with the opportunities coming up for both the integrated mobility plan and for the official plan, because we need you to be in these conversations to be able to move forward. I hope that you'll have conversations around your friend groups or your tables or your gardens around strouds and all these new terms that we've now learned from Brent, and that none of us are expanding our belts. I can't even say the term. And then I want to leave finally to you, Brent. Thank you for your very compelling, the truths, which are quite fascinating, and how you've been able to present them to us, the examples you've used, and we're very grateful to your talk and the fact that it's inspired us to continue this conversation. So a round of applause for Brent and for the team. I believe a presentation is going to be available because it's obviously on YouTube, but certainly available to you. There is still some water and coffee. It's on the city. It will be on the city's website soon. So thank you. Be safe, and we can see the beautiful waterfront here. And enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you. You're welcome.